Sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
Warp 1, engage!
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Discovery Edition. If you're new to our show, you can find all of our discussions, past, present, and in the future. Wherever you listen to podcasts, just search iTunes, Spotify. Or wait, what? Not, you don't search iTunes, Spotify. You search from the Holodeck. And our preferred feeds are Apple Podcast as well as Spotify because of their ratings and review systems and algorithms. All right. Hello, David. How are you?
How's it going, everybody?
So this discussion is slightly delayed. It's been a weird time of year for us, so we keep falling behind and then catching up. It is what it is. You know, we do this for free for the most part.
We're doing what the Discovery crew do and, Spore Jump.
Yeah, and I made a decision a couple years ago, Dave, that I think most of our ongoing listeners understand at this point. We really got to a point where we were all coming to the conclusion that maybe it's time to just end the network. I want to say, about 2-3 years ago, we started mulling over this
Yes, we have.
idea, and we still do. Every day we talk about whether or not we should continue as a network. And the compromise that we reached was, well, how about we just do shows when we can? And that's pretty much how we've managed to maintain. So it's either A, we do shows when we can, or B, don't do shows at all.
Don't do shows at all.
So the choices are pretty fucking easy. So please don't get mad at us because we're doing what we can do.
Yeah, and we are enjoying what we're doing, too.
Yeah, that's really the way people should look at it. We are very busy. We have our own professional lives. And the fact that we're willing to sit here and talk about something should show you that we love it that much.
Yeah.
That we're willing to sit here day in, day out and talk about these things. All right, David. Now, today's discussion is centered around the most recent episode of Star Trek Discovery titled Labyrinths. It's the 8th episode of the final season of Discovery. And really, David, it's episodes like this that really make me sad that Discovery's coming to an end. Because truly, an episode like this, where you have Burnham front and center, and you take her through a maze of vulnerability, and we're going to get into exactly what I mean by that in a moment, is some of the best ways that we've seen these writers take Burnham as a character, crack her open, and dissect her.
Yes.
We have never seen anything in its 5 years like this.
No, this is the antithesis episode of what me and you have discussed about.
Hey, Dave, can you just bump yourself over camera right just a bit?
Camera right?
Yeah, you're a little off.
How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, okay. But this is the perfect antithesis episode of what Kurtzman, that going against what Kurtzman said in an interview about the importance of filler episodes. Right?
What?
This right here has the bone structure of a filler episode where we actually do a deep dive into one single character of our crew. And this is something that Burnham's been needing since day one when she finally became captain. Where we finally get to dive into the psyche of Burnham and actually see she is trying to earn that spot. She is still trying to earn that chair as captain. And
well, Dave, I like that you say she's trying to earn that chair. That's something we've never heard
Burnham say.
And the fact that that's one of her fears, that she doesn't belong in that chair, that she shouldn't be a captain.
Yeah.
This is the type of self-analysis and introspection that we want in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
That Discovery really hasn't offered. And that's not a negative. You can't
No.
always do. Star Trek isn't designed as moments of introspection all the time. However, when you look at the best aspects of Star Trek, it's usually pertaining to moments of introspection.
Yeah.
Kirk, introspection. Picard, introspection. Avery Brooks's Cisco,
Oh yeah.
introspection. Janeway, out all alone, introspection.
Introspective.
Wondering if we're still doing the right things. And going back to Cisco for a second, wondering if the actions he's taking amidst the Dominion War is conducive with his own ideology and that of the Federation and Starfleet. Introspection. We haven't really had moments of introspection for Burnham. We've had moments this season of introspection throughout with other people, Tilly, Rayner, Dr. Colbert. And there's been other moments. Ash Tyler, I believe in season 3, moments of introspection. Giorgio, moments of introspection. But true introspection where you're weighing and judging yourself,
Yes.
your worth, and you're throwing aspects of fear, and it's revealed to the audience that much of Burnham's inner struggles are about fear.
Yes.
We have not had that. And this probably goes right back to what Sonequa Martin Green had said. We have now floated this idea countless times now throughout our discussion for season 5, when she says that it's a happy coincidence in a lot of ways that season 5 feels so complete for the show. Because when they were filming these episodes, they didn't know the series was going to come to an end.
Yeah.
And yet, every episode we've been given this season feels like an ending. It feels like it's wrapping up.
Yeah.
Threads, character development, pieces of cosmological assertions when it comes to creating the world of Star Trek, narrative closure. And then right here in an episode like this, in a lot of ways, this is closure for Burnham.
Oh yeah.
We haven't seen the ending of this closure yet, but this is the beginning stages of closure.
This right here, this episode, I say this is Burnham's In the Pale Moonlight episode, like how Cisco was.
Yeah.
Because that episode was a deep dive into the type of character Cisco was in the Pale Moonlight, where he has to battle with his inner demons and come to terms with it.
It's ideological tension is what it is.
And when you look at an episode like that, that helps set him different from the other captains. And it set his character up perfectly to who we know Cisco became. Here, we finally get that with Burnham, and I've been trying to see an episode like this because we need to actually have that moment where Burnham says, okay, this is what I'm thinking, and this is who I am, and this is why I deserve to be in that chair, or why I don't deserve to be in that chair.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that her characteristics now is centered around this fear sets her apart from the other captains, because all the other captains, I don't think any of the other captains ever dealt with the idea of fear being in that captain seat. Burnham is actually the first one.
Fear of self-worth.
Fear of self-worth.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, Kirk, no way. He's too egotistical to actually feel that his fear is being taken out of that chair.
Kirk believes that he should be in every captain's chair.
He should be in every captain's chair. And like his fear, you could say his fear is the opposite of Burnham's, where it's like, no. I need to be in that chair.
Right. His fear is of not being in the chair.
Yeah. Picard's is basically not. I think
legacy.
that legacy. It's about
it's been like
legacy
that
in
for a
chair.
long time. Yeah.
It's about basically his main
Of not having a legacy.
of not having a legacy.
Yeah.
Cisco is like, I have to make the choices that deserve to be in that chair.
In a lot of ways, and this will bring us right back to Discovery, in a lot of ways, your Cisco example is perfect, because in a lot of ways, Cisco's fears were and even retrospectively looking back on Deep Space Nine as a whole, his fear was, is this really what Starfleet and
Is
the
it
Federation
worth it?
really about?
Yeah, is it worth it?
Are we being pushed into war? Yes. But are there other options? There's always an option besides engaging in war. And that was really at the center of a lot of those philosophical episodes in Deep
Yeah.
Space Nine. Are we doing the right thing? Yes, we're under attack. And yes, we should defend ourselves. But are we, as an evolved version of humanity, making the right decisions? And when you look at what they're doing with Discovery and showing that the progenitor technology was hidden during the Dominion War, what's it saying about that time period? It's not a denouncement of Deep Space Nine at large, but in the world of Star Trek, let's look at just the canon and the politics that governs the Federation and its ideals. The Dominion War was not an ideal situation for the
No.
Federation or Starfleet. It's something that they probably wish they could remove themselves from.
Yeah.
It's a stain. Was it a stain of their doing? No, but it's still a stain. It's much like the United States in World War II.
Yeah.
Was the United States pushed into combat? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the United States didn't cause bloodshed
Yeah.
of its own.
Exactly.
So there's still some consequences there. It's a question of our own humanity, a question of your soul,
Of our ethics.
a question of our ethics. So the fact that the progenitors' ideas and the scientists who discovered the progenitor technology chose to hide it until essentially we were ready for it says something about the era of Deep Space
The
Nine.
Deep Space
That
Nine.
they were so afraid of this war that was going on that they weren't prepared to deliver this information to the very people that had started this scientific group of individuals to track down the progenitors. So all of this goes right back to fear. It goes right back to self-worth, introspection. So not only does a moment like this cause our character to reflect, but also as an audience, we reflect. The whole show, in a lot of ways, is the meta-narrative asking us to reflect on the historical past of Star Trek.
Yes. And that's the thing about like this, out of all the tests that the Discovery crew has been faced with, this is the one episode where the test I'm like going, yes, this is the type of test that basically is needed for the quest that they're on. The other tests were okay. They were fine. They've always, to me, the test always felt a little shallow to some degree.
Felt like a 1980s RPG.
Yes. And where it was kind of like, okay, here you go. You found the answer. You chose A and you chose the right page. Here, it's more substantial, and it's because it's more personal.
Yeah.
It's drawn in by your lead, by Burnham, who honestly also Sonequa Martin Green's acting has always been in question by a lot of fans. How she hasn't been the strongest actress or actor there is in the cast. This was actually a perfect time for her to actually put those naysayers wrong, because she did a fantastic job this time. She was able to actually take those moments and make them shine. Like even when it's not just her in the scene, she still was able to carry some of the emotion from her test to other parts in the scene, especially in the very end, where you could tell that Burnham was brought, even though this type of test isn't a physical test, so to speak, it is a mental test, and that almost broke her.
Well, it's an amazing mental test, because in order for them to release the information as to where this technology is, they have to make sure that you have the ability for introspection Because if you have, not everybody does. That's
Not
why
everybody does.
this is why this episode was so strong, at least for me. Because David, you know me personally, and I'm all about introspection.
Oh yeah.
I'm all about introspection because, in my opinion, many of the problems we have in society is because people's lack of or I should say their inability to truly look inside. And I'm not saying superficially, but I'm talking about questioning your very ideals.
Dissecting yourself.
Yes, questioning everything, which is really the root of all philosophy, is to question. And introspection leads to self-awareness, and that is how you have true progress. You have to be able to look at yourself fairly, objectively, which is really hard. I believe there was a philosopher, Thomas Nagel, that wrote a book called The View from Nowhere, I believe is what it's called. Let me look it up because I don't want to be a moron. Give me 1 second here.
You don't want to be oh man, I can't even think of the term for it.
Yes, it's Thomas Nagel. And his book, in a very brief synopsis here, is about objective perspectives. And really, the only way we can strive for objectivity is through the process of introspection. Because most of us would say, well, it's impossible to ever be totally objective. And I would agree with that. It is absolutely impossible. We are all indoctrinated from the very moment we're born. We're indoctrinated by something, someone, society. So we're never truly objective. But through the process of true introspection and the questioning of ourselves, you can reach a level of objectivity.
Yeah.
And that's why when you have a test designed around the notions of self-analysis, it makes so much sense just looking at Gene Roddenberry's original idea for Star Trek, which is built on the idea of people being able to look at the mistakes of the past, your mistakes you make currently, in order to live and have a better life for the future.
Yes.
So when I see people complaining about this episode, and I'm fucking flabbergasted, because to me, this is the embodiment of Star Trek, an episode like this.
Well, because like most of and I saw the complaints too about this episode, people have to understand that Star Trek shines when you do the deep dive into introspection, when you actually can look at these characters. And the reason why we connect so well with characters like Kirk and Spock and Picard and Sisko and all of them in the past is because we can relate and we see part of ourselves in those characters because they tackle really almost like primal issues within all of us. All of us have these primal issues as human beings. And that's what makes those characters shine, and why we love Kirk, because we all can understand his character. We can understand why he has a hatred towards Klingons because of his past. Why he is kind of xenophobic to some degree, because he's afraid of certain things. And like, I think today not a lot of people are willing to really embrace the fact that taking a moment to be introspective is actually making you stronger, not weaker. Because a lot of people that I notice,
The reason why people don't like to do it, though, is because they don't want
it's too hard.
Some people just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's been scientifically proven through numerous reports that I've read, numerous articles, that some people just don't have the ability to truly see themselves.
And
they
then-
just can't.
And then the sad part to me,
And then there's
is-
some who just are afraid
Yeah.
to see stuff they might dislike.
the sad part to me is now people use excuses like, I just want to relax. I just want to enjoy myself. Okay, you can enjoy yourself, but that's still a part of like some kind of using that as a crutch why you don't want to enlighten yourself.
Yeah.
is very upsetting.
The
It
only
should
way
be.
you can grow is through continually questioning your beliefs and ideas.
Yeah.
Once you stop questioning your ideas and beliefs, you are assuming you know everything. And once you assume you know everything, you quit learning.
You quit learning. You become stagnant.
And that's really one of the more interesting aspects of this whole fear and introspection aspect for discovery, because they only wanted, the progenitors only, or I should say the group of scientists only wanted to hand this information off if people were willing to question themselves, because by questioning themselves, there's a sense of responsibility. And to have this type of information requires responsibility. And in the subsequent episode, or I should say the subsequent scene that follows, when Burnham is taken back to the Discovery, when they beam aboard, she's immediately presented with the weight and the responsibility that was, let me think of a better way of saying this. So the moment she was given the power, it wasn't but a few seconds later where she was now presented with possibilities and options. Do you allow innocent people to die, or do you give the information to a warring species that would use it, no doubt, in detrimental ways? Now, that's an amazing question to pose for Burnham the very moment she was given that responsibility. But let's look at acting for a second.
That's where it shines.
A lot of people, you are right, David, have given Sonequa Martin Green crap. Not necessarily saying she's a bad actor, but saying that she is always crying, she's melodramatic, she only tears up, or she always tears up when she talks. But that moment is probably the single greatest Burnham captain moment that we will probably talk about for years to come.
Oh, yeah.
Every captain has that moment where you're like, wow, look at the performance the actor played in that part. And the moment when she was presented those options, she had to make choices. She didn't say a word. And that's real acting. You don't need to make yourself cry. You don't need to say things. That's not acting. Acting oftentimes is just reacting.
Yes. It's
And-
in a look. It's in a breath.
Yes, and when she feels that weight of responsibility, you see it. You see it in her eyes. Her eyes goes from calm confidence to, I'm not quite even sure of the word. It was almost like fear.
Fear.
She was afraid of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And you could see it in her eyes, so much so that she ended up getting those tears that a lot of people make fun of. That's when they're needed. Her eyes
Yes.
started to water because of stress.
Yes.
And the camera, thank God for the director, they allowed the director and the editor, they didn't try to cut through these scenes. And my biggest problem with a lot of modern day directing and cinematography is they're so quick to move from scene to scene in order to keep the excitement and to keep people engaged that they oftentimes negate the most important aspect of filming, which is just simply allowing your actors to sit in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Let them work
Let them work.
without cutting it up into various shots. And that camera stayed on Burnham without anyone else saying a thing. That is amazing directing, amazing editing, and fantastic writing.
Yes.
Or I should say fantastic acting.
Acting.
There we go.
That's why when I first saw this and I finished with that scene, I immediately went to In the Pale Moonlight with Benjamin Sisko, because it is the opposite. That is an example of how good acting works. Both of these in both different sides of the spectrum, where you see Burnham become almost broken and no dialogue is said, and the punchline in hers is similar to the one that happens in Sisko, when Sisko, this whole episode in Pale Moonlight, is screaming, punching, angry. That is his emotion throughout the entire episode. until the very end when he's given this choice after everything and he has to make a decision. And when suddenly the whole episode, he's been emotional and angry, punches Garrick, everything. The emotion just washes away from his face. And then he just says, I can live with that.
Avery Brooks was
Avery
on a whole
Brooks-
other level, dude.
Avery Brooks was just dynamite in that scene.
He was on a whole other level than any other. Say what you want about the other actors that played the captains. They've all been great.
Yeah.
But Avery Brooks never gets the credit for bringing in whole. I'm not sure what his acting style is, but he has a whole other method to acting. It's very different, his style. And it works so well for Deep Space Nine because Deep Space Nine as a whole was just a very different type of Star Trek.
Yeah.
But whenever you bring up Sisko, David, that says a lot because I think people who know us by now know that we just really gravitate to pretty much everything Sisko and Deep Space Nine. So if we're using that as a way to compare and contrast what's happening in Discovery in a positive way, that says a lot about the episode.
In that moment, basically, if you look at those moments and take it, take a step back and look at those moments, production acting wise, they are parallel to each other because they both get the job done without overblowing everything. They're perfect scenes.
It's not distracting anything.
But like when Avery Brooks, he takes that moment. What do? They keep on him.
Yeah.
They keep on his reaction, and Avery Brooks doesn't do anything like major. It's all in like the nuances. It's how he looks at the camera. It's how he takes a breath
subtle.
He makes this, and it's the subtleties come out more.
Yeah.
And then you look at Sonequa Martin Green, and I'm like going, the subtleties during that scene. No one says anything. You hear like the muffled noises in the background, but it zeroes in on Burnham, just her look.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the subtleties of acting.
And people
that's a lost art because we're in an era where we love villains. We have had, as a result, a lot of over-the-top performances that have now bled into the protagonists, where people now view good acting as people who act
outlandishly.
And I'm like, that's good acting. Don't get me wrong. I love those types of roles, but let's not lose sight of what acting really is. It's about conveying human emotion without necessarily always having to rely on language, on verbal language, on words.
And I'm sorry, at this point, and this is how good this episode is, it made me start questioning a lot of like the complaints that people have had for Discovery. And it's like, if you're complaining about Sonequa Martin Green constantly crying, man, you must have had a problem when Sisko was constantly angry and screaming at everybody.
Yeah.
Or you must have been really angry when Picard was overdramatic and Shakespearean all the time.
Yeah, they all had their own little thing.
Yeah. They have their own little thing. And Sonequa Martin Green here, this is perfection of her craft right here.
I agree. I agree. This is definitely one of the best examples of a Burnham scene, without a doubt. But just looking at the episode at large, we can broaden our scope just a bit more. The episode, written as it was by Lauren Wilkinson and Eric J. Robbins, is probably one of the best scripts of the season because look what it did. Not only did it push the plot forward, obviously, we also had those moments with Burnham, which were very much needed. We had amazing aspects for pretty much all of our character.
Nothing was wasted.
You had Commander Rise sitting in the captain's seat, taking control of Discovery. You had our bridge crew ready to go. There, being utilized. Nobody was just standing aimlessly by doing nothing, which seems to be a staple of Discovery oftentimes. We don't know who's on the bridge and what they're doing. In an episode like this, the writers made sure every single character had a point. Rayner, Book, Tilly, Stamets, Reno, Yadira, our new helm people, they all had a part to play. this is how you write an episode that still focuses on our lead. This feels a lot like an old school TOS episode just updated, or an old school TNG episode where you have your captain at the forefront. They're the ones that's really pushing the story forward, but that doesn't mean we discard all of our other players.
All our other players, yeah.
You're finding places for them. And an episode like this is probably the best episode of the season in that regard. It may not be the best episode in terms of content, but in terms of overall execution, when it comes to pretty much all facets of the craft, directing, writing, cinematography, acting, even visual effects, we didn't have muddled scenes.
Yeah.
We had very contrastive scenes. They were able to create the library actually look like it stands out. It gave it depth by adding those layers of clouds or gas clouds, whatever they were, around the space station, allowed the station itself to pop, and it didn't get lost in the visual effects in the background. When you had the Breen ship fly in, by using the gaseous clouds, you were able to see definitively the object. It didn't get muddled with a bunch of lens flare and light blooms.
Yes.
This episode probably overall is probably the most consistent episode of the season across the board when it comes to all facets.
Well, the amazing thing is, like, the last episode, I was really impressed how they were able to take all the characters and make every single character matter, right? And this has been a strength of Discovery this season. I think that's been growing.
Using their people better.
I
agree.
And I was like going, I guess I was being a bit of a skeptic.
Yeah.
I was like saying, oh, they can't continue this trend because, there has to be a moment when you dip and you basically go, here we go. That's a fall off from that. They got lazy, right?
Well, we talked about our problems with Detmer and Awosakun just missing an action for some reason that doesn't make a lot of sense.
That doesn't make sense.
But
it's a nitpick.
Other than that, the people are being used.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The people at least are being used. Your characters are at least being used. And like, that's the thing I really do appreciate about this season is like, I again find myself watching an episode where I don't feel like, well, why did this scene happen? Why are we doing this story with this character? No, everything actually flows really nicely one into the other, even down to like even the scenes with Maul and the Breen.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point for those scenes.
Yeah.
And it was like, even down to like Breen characters that basically we haven't been formally introduced to, yet you made the whole scene more tied to Maul's story about her drive and her motivation. We now know that she wants to use the technology to bring back Locke.
Yeah.
And it's a simple motivation, but at least they made it
sense.
Front and center.
Yeah, you don't need overly robust or dynamic reasons for everything. You can just keep things simple and consistent, and then we're not going to question. It makes sense. I will say the Maul thing did work for me in a lot of ways. It worked a lot better than I had anticipated. I knew they were going in this direction. I believe we talked about it during our last discussion.
Yeah.
And I even said, I hope they don't do this whole thing where she's going to take control or Locke will take control. And look, a new peace has been made with the Breen. And I had said, well, I'd be okay. I believe I had said I would be okay with them doing something like that as a way to give as a way to give Discovery a feather in their cap.
Yeah.
Like, looking back, they're the series that brought the Breen potentially into the Federation. At least you can leave it kind of open-ended with a question. Will this actually lead to future peace with the Federation? Well, it does seem like we may be going in that direction a bit, because if Maul has her say, she obviously is not a bloodthirsty loser. That was clear in this episode, because that's what we were thinking. Like, what is she not willing to do at this point in order to save Locke? Well, you can tell that she was not on board with them with the Breen destroying the library.
Yes.
She was not on board with them destroying Discovery. And through her own issues with the Primarch's decisions, she was able to manipulate the entire scenario in her favor because the other members of the Breen were seeing how he's just disrespectful to their culture. He doesn't care about their culture, doesn't care really about anything or anyone other than himself.
Yes.
And obviously, to his own demise, he miscalculated.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing.
And that is interesting. This is better. This is a better version, take 2, of one of the worst problems I have with Discovery season 1 is when the Klingon lady, I forgot her name, L'Rell, takes control of the Federation, or takes control of the Klingon Empire by threatening to blow up the planet. I'm like, oh, wow. So you're willing to destroy your entire people in order for you to have power. That's really not an honorable thing, but okay. And also, what an easy, oversimplified, contrived way to bring closure at the last minute to your plot.
Yeah.
That was weak. The way they're doing it and how they've been doing it all season, if we do get something similar to that, I would be okay with it because they are working for it.
Exactly. And that's the thing is if like they've at least established this idea of Maul since day one because of her relationship with Locke. And that's the thing that basically, if you start with a simple idea, that's fine. Keep it, but you have to keep it moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
You can't basically give me a simple idea and then give it to me within 1 or 2 episodes of the ending of the season. No, you got to establish it at least in the very beginning and then just carry it on so that basically, even if it's a simple idea, the payoff will feel like it's earned.
Yeah.
That's the problem with the Klingon one. That is like, it didn't feel earned at all. What it felt like in season 1. Here, I feel like the writing staff here have learned from past mistakes. And in a lot of ways, it's like they've taken a look at their history and Discovery and basically said, okay, we did this mistake. Let's not do this. Mechanically, we're going to actually take all those mistakes and put it to good use. And that's what I like about this season so far in Discovery is like, as I said, I entered the season very skeptical about the final season of Discovery. What is it going to feel like? And are they going to get lazy? Are they going to Picard this?
Picard season 1 this.
Season 1 this.
Yeah.
And I'm like going,
it doesn't,
no,
it
doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't feel that way at all. I would agree, especially with what they did with Book this episode as well, which is my second favorite part of this episode.
The World Tree, yeah.
What a great, seamless way to bring closure to Book's story, because this is really what they're doing. Again, they're working for it because now we have some idea of how this story's going to end for him. The fact that he now has a Quajon world route. Is that what it was? A cutting from a Quajon world route, which, if you guys remember from the 3rd season, it was essentially the world routes are a massive tree root system that extended around the entire planet of Quajon. It basically symbolized the heart of their culture.
Yes.
And it also connected. If you remember, that was one of the things that was interesting about Book and his culture to us anyways. It was really intriguing because of how they created this idea that all of them, their planet, the Quajon people, the animal life, they're all connected.
Yeah.
And what a great way to let Book sail off into the sunset with something positive. Because we can kind of figure out what this is going to do. If he has a cutting from a root,
Yes.
he can easily plant that tree root
Yeah.
on another planet, and he can essentially give the Quajon people a new homeworld.
A new homeworld.
Well,
yeah.
there are no Quajon people, but him and Maul are probably going to end up fucking just for the just for the reasons of keeping the species
The
alive.
species alive.
He's like, listen, Burnham, you're my gal, but
But
I got to keep my
I gotta get the species rolling again. I'm sorry.
yeah. It's philanthropy.
It's philanthropy.
Trying to save a society here.
That's gonna be like the newest excuse.
My dick. It's got to save worlds.
My seed is the only thing.
Before I can plant this seed, I got to plant this
The
seed.
seed.
I love the idea, though. Letting
It is.
forgetting all the silliness for a second. It's a great way to.
It's very Star Trek-y.
Yes, it's optimistic.
It's optimistic.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I basically tell people nowadays that complain about Discovery is like, you guys must hate optimism.
They must hate Star Trek, because even though there are some writing problems here and there with Discovery, it is a series that has, over the last 3 years, really, really tried hard to gravitate back to Roddenberry's original ideas.
Original ideas, which is solely based on optimism. Have
Yeah.
optimism.
And other things as well, but that's always going to be at the heart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the heart of it all, it is about having this optimistic future where, you know, we're supposed to be unified in this utopia, right? That's a utopia. But like, it's so interesting to me that basically Discovery embraces those elements of optimism, and yet Star Trek fans just rabble against it now. And I agree. You know, I was one of those early on in Discovery, but that was solely based on execution.
Yeah.
That is the reasoning why Discovery, to me, was weak in the very beginning, was because the execution of their production and execution of their story was flawed. Now I'm looking at this season, I'm like going, there's no flaws here yet. And I use that. That's why I've been saying since day one, yet. But we're already in like episode 8. I honestly feel now, and I have some optimism about this, that I think they're going to stick the landing. And that's the thing that I always approach.
Don't say that yet. Don't jinx it.
But the thing is, I have that optimism now.
Oh, look at you.
And back then, I'm like, oh, they're gonna crash. They're gonna crash and burn.
I don't. I'm beyond that. Like, I don't believe Discovery sucks. So,
Yeah.
like, during season 2, we were nervous. During season 3, we were nervous. But I think moving into season 4, we're like, okay, they're showing that they're
Progress.
capable of writing Star Trek. They're trying really hard to bring things back to how they should be in Star Trek. And they have formed a pretty decent writing room. As long as they can get out of their own way, meaning with the over assertion of identity politics at times, which I'm all about that. I'm fine with that. If that's how you choose to shape your narrative and you're saying something philosophical about it, absolutely. I'm never going to say you should tie your hands. If this is what the writing room is interested in exploring, and you use the ideas of philosophy to dissect and push those ideas forward, then I will always be on board. But there have been times where they kind of get in their own way.
Yes. And that,
But outside of that, the show has shown itself to really care about Star Trek
oh yeah,
and cares how it's received.
mm-hmm.
You have to. A lot of people like to be negative and say, why do they not care? They do care. If they don't care, shows don't last. They all want a job. They're not going to push their politics to their own detriment.
Yeah, they're not going to. They wouldn't be showing this type of progress.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really like about the past 2 seasons is this is the one time in Discovery for all the seasons me and you have covered where I'm seeing legitimate progress in their quality
Quality of story. Yeah.
of story.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's It's a huge improvement. And this season, though I have some problems here and there with, overall I'm okay. And I'm not nervous how they bring the series myth arc to an end.
That's the thing.
I'm a little nervous still how they bring the overall season to an end, because as we talked about already a couple times, Dave, if you remember, they were already done shooting when it was announced that this would be the end for them.
Yes.
So they then went back and shot an additional episode. So they have an ending to the immediate myth arc, and then they have an ending to the season. I'm nervous about that final episode.
I think that's my only nervousness, but I'll be honest, I am not. This sounds scary because, like, I think for the amount of times me and you have covered Discovery and any other Star Trek one, I always have like this hesitation when we're getting close to the end, right? I always say, oh man, they gotta stick that landing. I hope they stick that landing. This is the one time that me and you have covered that I can think of where I'm like going, I actually don't feel nervous about this.
Yeah. I'm not nervous like I think they're going to screw it.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to screw the pooch at the end. I don't think that. I hope it's everything it needs to be.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to suck. I just hope it's everything it needs to be and more.
Yeah. I'm like going, this is the first time where I'm like going, I feel like I'm going to land on the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be okay, but we're going to find out if the trip was worth it.
Well, the last Star Trek series, I don't count Picard in.
No,
even though Picard season 3 ended already, or I should say with its third season it ended. For all intents and purposes, Star Trek Discovery really is the first show since Enterprise to come to a real ending.
Yes.
And we all know how Enterprise ended.
Yeah.
And I really...
It was so bad.
I don't want another series where we scratch our head. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. That's the thing that I'm going to be...
That's what I'm nervous about. I'm nervous that the studio didn't give them enough additional money and time to give us a real ending.
Yeah. If they do an episode where it's all of a sudden 10 years later and stuff like that.
Oh. And it's in a holodeck.
And it's no, it's going to be in Burnham's journal.
Riker and Deanna Troi are in a holodeck again.
No, Mike. It's going to be in Burnham's journal about her entire journey for like 10 years after. And then she's going to go how great Discovery turned out. And she's going to be sitting under the world tree of Quajon.
I was about to say that. with little Quajon kids running around. And
with little Quajon
Bookhead kids. Please don't do that.
Yeah, it's going to end like that.
Yeah. All right, David. We are at the end of our discussion. Briefly, because we have to close out. Mostly because I have to take a pee really bad. 15 seconds or less. Grade and final thoughts.
My grade for this episode is a solid 95. It's actually one of the highlights, I think, of this season for Discovery, because we finally get to see Burnham, who is our lead, front and center.
Yeah.
And we finally get to... I can fully say, like, okay, she's earned it. She is the lead. She's Captain Michael Burnham. This is why
Captain Michael Burnham.
Let's fly. Sure.
Oh, she said it this episode, and it actually sounded okay.
And
Did you notice that? She's
Yeah.
all right, let's fly.
All right, let's fly.
If you say it like that, I'm okay.
I'm okay now.
But when you sell it like in a Beyonce way,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
fly.
Yeah, and that's why I said now we're okay. Okay, so it's a very solid episode. I think that it's honestly one of my Dark Horse favorite episodes, because I loved the whole thing with Burnham having this introspective moment. It gave me Voyager vibes of like one of my favorite episodes where Janeway has to deal with that one entity and locks it away, and that AI entity in a dreamscape.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with like the villain basically saying, "I don't know what's after. I'm afraid." And then Janeway says, "I know." And it just ends. And I'm like going, that gave me vibes of that, especially watching Janeway, the lights, or Burnham, when the lights in the library start going out. And I'm like going, I'm expecting that villain to pop out door going, "I'm afraid."
Lights out, motherfucker.
But overall, I really liked the episode.
Okay, 95%. David, I'm going to also give it a 9. No, you know what? No, I'm going to give it a 96%. It is my favorite episode of the season so far just because of sheer strategy. Everything they did, and they did it right. I don't understand the complaints, but again, that's the internet, and the internet doesn't make sense sometimes.
Optimism does not belong in the internet, Mike.
Yeah. So that takes us to the end. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.